there we go, because we are going to be putting these sessions up on YouTube. And that's actually one of the things that I really liked about the virtual, sorry, let me go back to the links and I'll put them back in the chat. I don't know about you guys, if you've been attending the last 2 days, probably don't feel like as clumsy as I do a little bit. I feel like I'm having to like get back into like school mode and mentality, and especially in the virtual world of mentality. I definitely this morning was like, okay, I remember how to do everything. It seems so natural last year, and it definitely doesn't feel as natural right now. But getting back into the swing of things. Right. All right, I'll give another minute to get links set up. Don't forget to sign in. You do need to sign in for all 3 parts of today. So make sure that you sign in the chat. I think somebody joined us. Afterwards, I'll put those links back into the chat. Give another minute to fill out the sign in. And welcome, welcome. All right, we can go ahead and we'll start. So with today's session, we are going to get into kind of the nitty gritty of Google Classroom rubrics. So today's session is definitely going to be more of like how to do things and walking through step by step on how to create rubrics in Google Classroom and to start implementing them and grade with Google Rubrics. But I do want us to remember, and I'm reposting this because I just really like this quote from Joe Feldman. This is from his book, Grading for Equity. And the reason why it's important to include rubrics. I definitely try to include rubrics with most things that I do, especially most bigger ticketed items. Here, and let me put in the sign in. And I really try to do it, especially with things that we do quite often in the classroom. So students have a really good understanding of what we're doing in the classroom, what is expected of them, what they need to do to improve their grade and how to have those improvements. And it also makes grading a lot easier for me because I'm not having to kind of think about I think about my first year of teaching when I was like, what's the difference between the A and a B, and 10 points versus 15 point assignments, and trying to think about all of that. And having a clear-cut rubric, it also helps take that mental load off of me as I'm doing the work and grading, because I know exactly what I wanted them to do and have those expectations clear right from the get-go. And I'm all about empowering students and having students really be the center of their own learning. And rubrics are a great way to make sure that rubrics are the center of their own learning here. So like I said, for today, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of Google Classroom rubrics. And so you should walk away with the session knowing exactly how to use those rubrics, to create those rubrics, and then even adding sheets in as rubrics, which seems to be the way, when I was just kind of refreshing my memory and refreshing everything and looking at, I look at a lot of YouTube educators. It seems like I was kind of I always just create rubrics in Google Classroom, but having sheets is definitely a great way to do that too, especially if you're sharing with your PLC. And but it can get a little tricky. So I'm going to show you 2 templates on how to use it. So it makes it a lot easier to use those sheets as rubrics, and then grading and what the students see on their end. I'm actually going to jump away from slides. So a lot of my slides and my presentations are kind of like how-to guides. So when you walk away today, you can look back for each slide in each section. I actually created little videos of exactly what I'm talking about. And so, because one of the things that I hate going to some sessions and trainings, it's I get all these great ideas and then I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I implement that? And so the slides, I'm going to step away from the slides and we're going to go into live how to do each of these things. But after today, at any point throughout this school year or next year, you can look and refer back to the videos on exactly how to do it. So the slides are more of a how-to guide where I'm going to be doing live demonstrations. We are a smallish group. And so if you have any questions, you need me to slow down, you need me to pause or stop or whatever, feel free to write in the chat. unmute yourself, like say, hey, what is this? Or can you do that again? So let me know what you guys need with it. Awesome. I'll get your, and I'll keep putting the sign in and the slides up there. So to make sure you do that. And so can't stress that enough. It's just to make sure that you are signing in for each of these parts today. So for the second part here. All right, so I'm going to jump right into Classroom. So if you want to walk along with me, I invite you guys to, if you want to have another tab open or another window open with Google Classroom. I just created a kind of a throwaway class for this so that you don't have to go through my mess of a classroom and kind of see everything. But I'm going to show you too what it looks like grading on the end as well. But if you want to create your own Google Classroom, if you want to walk through and kind of go, I know sometimes I learn better by doing it with the person. So if you want to create a Google Classroom real quick, or you know, just go to your Google Classroom and kind of create some fake assignments and things like that, feel free to walk with me. So I'll give it another minute in case you want to set up. If you just want to watch too, that's perfectly okay, because I like doing that too. And like I said, all of the slides have the videos. Each section of the slides have videos that go along each of these parts as well. So, all right. So to get to the rubrics, you need to create an assignment. So just, you can create an assignment. You can also add in rubrics after you create an assignment. So like a lot of times I'll forget to like attach the rubric to an assignment, so I can attach it later on. Just make sure you haven't graded anything yet, because it can get a little wonky at that point. But I'm going to go ahead and create an assignment. And I'm just going to call this session 1. And for the assignment, it's going to show you like everything here. So we can assign it to multiple classes if we want to assign it to multiple classes. Points values, don't worry about, because once you create the rubric and you assign points to each of the levels, it will actually add it up for you. Your due date, your topic, and then of course this magic button, this rubric here. All right, and so here we have our Google, or this is the Google Classroom rubric builder. And with this rubric builder, this is actually the way that I prefer to do it. I tend to have like rubrics that are kind of already created that I can just modify, and I just like copy and paste it in. But like I said, I think I might be like, I don't know, a lot of times I make things harder for myself too. So Google Sheets is also an option too to use, where you can reuse those rubrics every time. But I found this way it was really easy for me as well. And so with this Google Classroom rubric, you can add in criterion. And so if and you can add in multiple levels of criterion as well. So if I'm thinking about like my standard like English rubric that I use, we have structure, content, and use of language. And so I can build all those criterions, those 3 different criterions, right into Google Classroom with here. So I'm going to call this one structure. And you can add a description or you can leave it blank. So if you wanted to say like something like, you know, looking at the actual structure of an essay, or looking at how the essay like works together, you can put that in, but it's not required. But your points are required. So I tend to use a 4-point scale, and I like having, for my brain, I like having it going in descending order, but you can also switch this to ascending order depending on how you want to use it. You also have the option to turn off scoring. So if I just want them to look at level feedback, there's a lot of power of not having students look at point values with things, and there's a lot of research showing that as well. So if I wanted to turn off point values, I can also turn off point values here, and now I don't have to put it. When I turn off point values though, the level title is now required. So I can put this as exemplary or whatever I want to title that level, but it's now going to be required with it. So use scoring, points are required and level titles are not, but when you turn that off, then the level title is not required anymore. And then adding in a description here. So this is where I just usually copy and paste from previous rubrics, but you can add in any sort of description as you want. So I'm going to keep it super simple here and not what I would do in the classroom, but I'll put in awesome. And then I can click this plus button and I can add in other levels. So 3 points, This one is meet standard, and I'll put in yay. Then 2 points, approaching standards or meet, like nearing standards, whatever it is, put and 1 point, does not meet, and just put no. I would put in my classrooms, and I'll show you some examples of rubrics that I do use in the classroom. Definitely would add in more description here for this purpose. I'm not going to, but I can see that I have this here. And because I have a 4-point scale, it automatically adds it up to 4 points. But I can also add in another criterion with here. So if, like I said, if I'm thinking about my English essay, I have structure, use of language, and or structure, content, and use of language. So I can add a criterion here, and I can do the same thing that I just did above. However, if the criterion is pretty similar, like I'm going to use these same descriptions, just kind of modify it for whatever the criterion is, I can go to these 3 dots here, and I can click on it, duplicate this criterion. And now it just duplicated it for me. So now I have 2 structures. So I'm going to title this one content. And it's the same here. And if whatever I need to modify, if I need to add or delete levels, I can do that as well. And as you can see, my point values has changed too. So now I have this, instead of 4, now it's calculating it as 8. And then for my last criterion here, so again, if you want to duplicate a criterion, you just go to these 3 dots, click on duplicate criterion. You can also delete it, or if you need to move criterion up or down, you can do that too. So depending on what you want students to see first. And for the last one, I'm going to title this one use of language. And for this one, I just want to have 2 points here. So there's only 2 things that I'm going to be looking at. So I'm going to put 2 and then 1. And now I can see that my score has changed to 10. So the criterion does not need to match every single time. If I have different point values assigned to different levels or different criterion, I can do that. So if I wanted to have 4 points for structure, 3 points for content, and 2 points for use of language, I can do that, and Google's going to automatically add them up for me here. All right, everybody good so far? So it's pretty simple to use in Google Classroom. The only thing that gets a little tricky is like adding the descriptions. It's a lot of typing, but I usually just copy and paste it from whatever I'm previously using and add it in here. All right. So once that's in there, then I'll click on save. And now I have my rubric with my criteria that is shown right here. And I can assign this to multiple classes, to just one class, however I'm doing this. And I can go ahead and assign. And now that shows up right here. And I can see it, I can look at the rubric at any time. Now, like I said, I usually just create the rubrics in Google Classroom. To me, that's pretty easy to do and to copy and paste, especially with those descriptions. And then another reason is because it's pretty simple to reuse rubrics as well. So if I create a new assignment and I'm going to be reusing a rubric that I've previously used, excuse me. I'm going to call this a TFR example because I teach Avid, so we do a lot of TFRs and tutorials. And so this is a rubric that gets used pretty frequently in my class. So I'm going to go back down to rubric here, and instead of creating a rubric, I'm going to click on reuse rubric. And up here, I have the choices of classes. So if I've used this rubric before in another assignment for this class, I can just find that assignment and reuse that rubric. So I think that's one shift using rubrics in Google Classroom, is that when you reuse it, you're looking for that assignment, not necessarily the rubric titled. So if you have it titled something else in your Google Drive, but then created it in Google Classroom, you're looking for that assignment here. You can also go to different class periods. So like period 1, I use TRX a lot, or I've used this rubric in period 1. So now I can go to a different class period and I can click on the assignment that this rubric was used with. So I'm going to click on the week 18.2. And now I have it here. so I can see this rubric, it's going to like just add it in automatically. If I need to edit it, I'm going to click on the rubric and then click on these three dots here and click edit. And now I can modify the rubric for this assignment. So when you make changes in this rubric, it's only going to make changes for the assignment that you're attaching it to. So it's not like we have a template of rubrics that we use. It's going to be specific to that assignment that we're assigning in. But now I can make any changes in here. So like, let's say, I'm going to scroll down and add a criterion, and I'm going to put communication as my criterion title. I'm going to give this 2 points and 1 point. Now I've made changes to the rubric, so I can click on save. And now I have a rubric for that, modified rubric for that particular assignment. So that's one reason that I usually just create the rubrics in Google Classrooms. We tend to do a lot of the same or use the same rubrics for like multiple assignments, or we do a lot of repetitive activities like our TRFs that we do weekly. So it's pretty easy for me to just create it in Google Classroom and then reuse the rubric over and over again. So I'll go ahead and click assign. All right, and that is it for creating. Any questions so far for creating rubrics or reusing them? All right, I know this isn't the most like interactive session, so let me again pause. You need me to pause or just shout out if you have any questions as we go through here. All right, now, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Do the students see exactly what you just showed us when they log in? So they would see that there was a rubric, and then you tell them, or they already know because they've done it before, to click on that to look when before they start their assignment? Yeah,
they will see exactly what you see. And I have it, let me switch over, and I'll show you exactly what students see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Amber, can I ask a slightly off-topic question, but related to the last comment?
Yes.
Do you know if the district is open to allowing teachers to have a faux student account? Because there's been other situations where it's like, I want to see the student side of this, but my computer knows it's me. I can't, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can ask again. I've been trying for a while to try to get some student accounts because especially like trying to create videos and stuff. Google Classroom does work. Like what I'm showing you right now is a personal account. So I have 2 personal Gmail accounts. And so I just created a Google Classroom in one and like added some fake assignments and then added myself as a student with my other account. So that I can show and kind of see what students see on the end. But yeah, I agree. If we can have like a fake student account, I'll ask again and see what goes. And then what assignments that I'm using these rubrics for, I try to use them for pretty much everything, especially the assignments that we're doing pretty consistently. So I'll show you in the TRF example that I do. TRFs are what we use in Avid. So students have to fill them out twice a week, and then we do our tutorials based on them. And so I have like a pretty clear rubric of what I'm looking for. So really any assignment that you assign, now there's a lot of assignments I don't assign rubrics for just because I just haven't created them yet, but I try to, with any assignment, put in a rubric just so that students are really clear about what they need to do for that assignment. So that's what I use them for, but I'll show you some examples too of my own classroom so you can kind of get an idea. And then looking at the student view. So the classroom, like I said, I'm in my own classroom here as a student, but this is a TRF that's here. So I can look at the assignment and then I can see that there's a rubric that is attached here. So I can open that up and as a student be able to see those rubrics specifically. If I left, like as a teacher, if I like graded any of these, or it would show me which like score I got and what the teacher selected as my score. So students are going to be able to see exactly what teachers see there. They'll see that there's a rubric, they'll be able to look at that. And that's one thing that I do want to like emphasize too. Again, we're trying to use rubrics to empower students so students are in control of their learning and they have like really clear expectations of what they need to do. So we should be interacting with these rubrics a little bit more. So like I would definitely go over the rubrics with the students, have them spend some time looking at them and just remind them, like, I mean, I can't tell you how many times like I'll put something on Google Classroom and think that like, because I put it there, it's obvious that it's there. And students are like, I never saw it. Like they never thought to click here. So definitely like I would go over with students, like how, like with the rubrics that they've attached here. But students will be able to see all of this as we go through it. Great questions. Any other questions before I move on? All right, let me make sure that I'm sharing the right window again. I feel like using Zoom again is a little like a little clunky today. But, all right, so going back to okay, so then we've talked about creating the rubrics, how to reuse rubrics, and now I'm going to talk about sharing rubrics. So if you have a rubric that you're using that you've created, it's really easy to share with your PLC here, or your colleague or whoever you want to share that with. So I would go back to the assignments that I have the rubric attached to, open up the rubric, and I'm going to click on these three dots here. Now, I say it's easy, but it is going to take a couple of steps. So it is going to ask you to export to Sheets. So you can't just share directly in Google Classroom. You have to export it to Sheets first, and then share it with your colleagues, and then they have to import it into. So I'll go ahead and click on exporting Sheets. And I'm going to, it pops up so I can just view it from here once it's imported. Now it doesn't look pretty. Like this isn't going to be like a nice, like when I look at this, I'm like, oh, because I like having everything like nice and neat. I wouldn't really worry about this too much, especially if you're only using this rubric to import and to export into Sheets or export and to import into Sheets, Google Classroom. But like for me, like this really drives me nuts. So I like to just highlight this and then click on format and just wrap the text. So at least I can see all the text. But I wouldn't make any more changes than this because Google can get a little like finicky. What I've found is it can get a little finicky as you import Sheets into Google Classroom. Like it has to be like kind of a specific-ish way. And so don't make any other changes unless you're just like wrapping text. I would just like leave it alone. But from then here, you can share into your Google Classroom, share it with whoever you need to share it with, and then they'll put it in their drive and redo it. And I'll show you guys how to import Sheets in just a second as well. So again, to share the rubric, you're going to go to the three dots and click export to Sheets, and then it's going to create the sheets and you'll share it that way from there. The other thing I want to point out as you're creating Sheets is in your drive, Google, once you export Sheets, it's also going to create a folder for you. So my folder was actually, I have a classroom folder that Google creates. So if I click on my classroom folder and it has like all of the Google Classrooms of all time in here, so it gets a little messy. But if I scroll down, I'm looking for rubric exports. So Google will automatically, once you export a sheet, it will automatically create this folder for you in your Google Classroom folder. And then, so if you need to find that rubric at any other point, this is a good place to look for it. So but it gets a little like funky, like especially if your drive is a mess, like mine can be. It can get a little funky to look. But I wanted to point out that Google Classroom will create that folder for you once you export Sheets. So if you want to share it again, if you want to reuse it again, you can it's there for you. So that can be a really great example of or way to export distant sheets, and then you have it in Google Sheets to reuse over and over again. All right. So then to import it into Google Classroom, again, you're going to look at your assignment to get a bit of a title. So I'm just going to call this import. Go back to my rubric, and now I can import from Sheets here. And it's going to automatically look for the spreadsheets that I've already created. So this one is my TRF example, the one that I just exported to Sheets. So I can do that and import it in, make any modifications that I need to in here. So it's all there. I can change it or not and click save when I'm done. One thing that I want to point out though is if this sheet was shared with you, I would highly recommend starring it and adding it to your drive. So it would be the next button to add it to your drive. That way it shows up when you click on import from sheets, it shows up in this first window here. It gets a little weird when you like share, like when you're trying to find a shared sheet with like, you know, your friend shared a sheet with you and now you're trying to find it. I would just make sure you add it to your drive so that it shows up in your space on this first screen here. If it doesn't, then just look for the title of the rubric and it will pop up that way. But I would just make sure you add it to Drive if it was shared with you. All right, so that was a lot. So we have looking at how to import sheets. So again, go to your rubric, click export to sheets, share it that way. And then when you want to import it from another teacher, then you'll just click on, let me edit it here. And you'll just click on edit, import from sheets. So pretty easy to, easy-ish to share. So if you are doing the same assignments, I highly recommend splitting up that work and just sharing the sheets with one another or creating a Google Classroom and sharing those sheets with one another. And then just importing it that way too. All right, go back to my classroom. The next thing I want to share is looking at using, you can also import from sheets, which we just did with the ones we exported, but you can also create the rubrics in sheets. But this is where I found it got a little tricky. A lot of like YouTube educators swear by sheets and like say that's the only way that they like do rubrics. And for me personally, it was easier to create in Google Classroom. And the reason why, like I tried doing a couple sheets of my own and it wouldn't accept it. And the reason why is that it does need to be in a specific template. So I highly recommend, and I just lost my earbud. I highly recommend putting these, using these templates from Alice Keeler. Alice Keeler is, if you haven't followed Alice Keeler, haven't like looked at any of her stuff yet, she is an educator that has like amazing templates to use for Google, a lot of Google stuff. And so these rubrics are really nice to use because everything is there. I just need to fill it in. So I'll show you what that looks like and I'll put the links up in the chat. And I just realized it's typed here. So let me retype that in the chat. All right. So these links are going to give you to a template maker, and they are pretty much the same, except for one has a point value system automatically in it, and one doesn't. Oh, I just realized this link is wrong. All right, let me fix that. So it is going to ask you to make a copy, but what I really like, and like I said, both of these templates are pretty much the same, except for one is going to have like points values already added in. So when you import it into Google Classroom, it's already kind of done point value for you, whereas this one doesn't. If you can use either one and add those points into Google Classroom later too, or change or modify those points in Google Classroom if you need to. But from here, what I like about this particular template is that it kind of, she has a lot of hidden like formulas that are in here that automatically like kind of pop up as I start like populating this. So the title that's here is going to be your criterion title. So if I stick with the structure, and then it automatically populates another criterion for me, which I'll show you in a minute. I can add the description or I can leave it blank. She has like 4-point scale language here, and then adding in those descriptions of whatever we need. So if I use like title this title, use of let's make this content. and use of language. I can get. And again, it keeps popping up. Now, let's say I only need the 3 criterion. On this template, I can actually just delete what I don't need and have it there as well. So I can just use this template, populate, copy and paste whatever I need to if I have a different rubric that's in it. And the formula is going to fit in with using it for Google Classroom. Like I said, I tried to use create some rubrics and sheets or transfer it from a Google Doc that I had. And I had some issues with it actually accepting my rubric because it wasn't in the specific formula. So I really recommend, if you're using Google Sheets, to use these templates, just because it makes it so much easier and you don't have to worry about it not accepting or rejecting or anything like that. So I can add all of this in. And then if for example, with the use of language, I only needed 2 criterion, I'm going to delete these 2. And then I can just change this to say incomplete and then add in everything that I need to put in there. All right, I'll pause for a second. Any questions so far about using the rubrics or the templates? All right. Feel free to stop me at any point if you need to. All right, and then so from here, then I can do exactly that, where I can create the classroom. I'll call this importing from Sheets. Takes a minute, there we go. Import from Sheets here. And again, it's going to be, it's the last one I worked on, so it should be the first one that pops up here. So we'll add it. And it pops up to this editing page, so I can change this. Now I used the rubric that didn't have the scoring automatically in it. So I can change that by clicking on the use scoring, and it will fill in kind of point values. You can also change these point values. Like say I want this to be 10 points. I want this to be 8 points, 6 and 4. I can also change it so it doesn't have to be in numerical order. You can change it to kind of whatever point value works for your classroom, whatever rubric that you have for it. So you can change that as you need to. And then I can modify if I need to modify and edit and then save. And now I have it. So this is just another way of how you can add it in. I know, like I said, a lot of people prefer using Sheets, so just add them in. I personally have found it just easy enough to just create everything into Google Classroom and then putting it in that way. And I'll go ahead and sign. All right, I'll pause again. All right, so one of the other last-ish things I want to show you is how to grade in Google Classroom. And so I'm actually going to jump to my first period class here. And I'll show you an example of those TRFs that I have. I'll show you 2 examples of the work in my class. So this is a TRF. Now this isn't, I don't grade, since we do TRFs by we do it twice a week, I only grade one of them, but I'll attach a rubric to both. So this is an example of one of the ones that I didn't grade. I graded the first one that they did for this week. So you can see some examples here. So I have some that are already graded in here. So if I'm going to click on Abigail's here. And I didn't return these back, so that's why these say draft, but I can see the rubric attached here. Now there's a couple of ways to look at the rubric in Google Classroom. So for those that are at my site, you can also use this with Kami, so you can still grade with Kami and have everything, all the functions that are there. Or if you have Kami, you can still grade with Kami with that way. I'm going to turn it off for this, but you still have those full Kami functions as well. So I can still edit, put types and comments and things like that along with the rubrics as well. So a couple of things I can do here. So she already has a grade, but I can put in the 4 here. So if I know my rubric pretty well, I can just kind of glance, put in a score for her that way. I can also click on one of these boxes here. So I had I set everything up so it's descending. So I always know that this first box here is going to be a 4, 3, 2, and 1, or whatever point values I assign to it. And so I can just click on the ones. Now, if I can't remember the point values, my cursor is like ridiculously large, so I can see it on the projector. But so it's kind of hidden, but you can see the point values there. So it's like 4, 3, 2, 1 if I need to hover over it. But my favorite part about this is I can actually unhide the descriptions here. And now I can see the rubric directly. So if I'm using a newish rubric, or if I have like a student that has kind of like a trickier to grade assignment, I can look at this and see like, where do I want to put her at? And so I can really look at the description and kind of help me grade there as well. So this is really awesome to be able to use and to kind of have like side by side with the assignment there. If I'm like, once I grade it, if I want to put any private comments down here, I can also add in those private comments and post them. And then if I'm ready to return it, I can return to the student as well. If I don't want to return it, like I want to return all of these once I'm done grading all of them, then I can just go through it and click on the next student. Hers was missing, so I don't look at that one. I'll put to one until I have all of them that's graded. The other really nice thing about Google Classroom is it's going to remember this sidebar here. It's not going to change for me. So if I want the descriptions up, as I move through students, that description will stay up. If like I'm starting to get comfortable with the rubric and I don't need the descriptions anymore, I just want to see like a cleaner view, it's going to remember that for me. So however I want to grade and look at the rubric as I'm grading, I can be able to see there as well. So everything's right there. And if I need, for whatever reason, to open the rubric in a new window, I have that option as well. So like 3 ways to grade here, either putting in the point values here, clicking on the boxes, or by looking at the descriptions of it. All right, any questions so far on any of that stuff? Last thing I want to show you is I want to show you a version. So if you have, let me find our StoryCorps. A lot of times in my classroom personally, I try to keep assignments as like one criteria thing, but that's not always possible. So if you have multiple criteria, because we can set that up, you can actually grade the work that way as well. And you can see some missing assignments that are here. So I can open up their assignments and be able to grade their work with the multiple criterion. So for example, actually use GK Goes. So for example here, if I look at this, I can see the assignment and then I can see the rubric here with the different criterion. So this one had 2 criteria that I was looking for, which was the interview and the reflection. And I can do the same things here, that I can look at the boxes and be able to change the score in the boxes. I can, if I know the rubric well enough, I can just click on the boxes here or put in the score this way as well. The nice thing about doing it this way too is that Google Classroom will automatically add up the points for you so that you can put that here as well. The one thing I will have, because I tend to do everything like 4-point scale. So when it has multiple criterion, sometimes I forget to do that. So you can also change the total point values here. If you like if I put in 4 points, it's like what I said this assignment was going to be worth, but then I added the rubric later and it kind of messes that up. You can still change it and just make sure that you go back to the students who have already graded and correct the point values. And usually you can just click on something on the rubric and it will automatically update for the students. So if you need to make those changes, you can make those changes if you need to. But grading makes it super simple. And this is one of my favorite things about using Google Classroom and about using the rubrics in Google Classroom, is because I love the side-by-side view of it. And it makes it really easy just to be able to click through and to go through and return student work with that clear cut rubric with there. All right. Yeah, so one of the things that we use, so a lot of times we go over the rubric and we break down the language. So like I said, a lot of these rubrics I'll use over and over again. So like, for example, this is a speaking and listening rubric that I'll use for like multiple assignments. And so one of the things that we do is we will like kind of front load. Like the first time we use the rubric, we'll go through the rubric and talk about like what it means. We're using an RPLC. This was an English PLC rubric that I used. And this is a rubric that we kind of came up with as our PLC. And so the first time we use this rubric with students, like we had them break it down, kind of highlight vocabulary they didn't know, really kind of talk about the rubric so that they did understand that. But I would definitely suggest like making sure that the rubrics are student-friendly language, like especially if you're not going to go to like that level of detail of like going over the rubrics, just really making sure that students really understand what those rubrics mean and how you can get there. And so like this particular rubric that I was just showing with the speaking and listening, I'll go back to it. This particular rubric was a bigger assignment. And so we were using a rubric that I had used previously. We were kind of familiar with working with it. But if you're using something that's, you know, like maybe for like a more everyday assignment or like whatever, I would definitely recommend having the student-friendly language with it and like kind of keeping the language pretty simple so they do understand what it means. You know, it just depends on how you're using that rubric in your classroom for sure. With that. All right. And so with that said, if you guys have, and like I said, I showed the student view because that was the last thing I was going to show, but I've already showed that. So we have a little bit of a break, but if you guys have any questions, if you want to see any more examples from my classroom of like how to use, like I use rubrics or how to like set these up or whatnot, feel free to ask. Actually, before, and I almost forgot that going back to empowering your students and go back to like Kyle's question here, that we definitely want to make sure that we are using rubrics to empower the students. If your students don't know the language, that's not empowering them. That's not going to be helpful for them of like, how are they going to be using that rubric? So really making sure that we're using rubrics in a way that it's very skillful and then it's making students the center, like making them the center of their learning and not just putting rubrics out there so that like it's easy for us. Yeah, and I'll go over those Google Classroom tools. But so some ways to use rubrics to empower students. And again, this comes from Joe Feldman's book, Grading for Equity, but really scaffold by focusing on a single criterion. So I really try to keep it simple when I use the rubrics. And I really try to keep my criterion to like 1 to 3. And 3 is like going to be like major assignments that we've been working on for a while. So most of my assignments will only have one criterion because I really want them to focus on whatever skill set they're doing for that one assignment. Again, talking about translating into student-friendly language and then finding those connections between the project and the rubric. So making sure that you're really explicit about how does this piece of the the language in the rubric. So for example, like propelling conversations was a bit for my rubric. How is that used in your interview? Like how does the rubric connect to what we're doing? And then collaborate those interpretations. I really recommend that if you can, to have students look at examples of whatever you're doing. When I taught English, Springboard had examples of essays. And so I would show them like a 1-point assignment versus a 4-point assignment and talk about like, had them kind of evaluate each different levels to really kind of see what was expected and what each level actually means. So if you have the time, I really recommend, especially for bigger projects, really recommend doing that. And then going over some questions in the chat. Looking at those Google Classroom icons. So these are just emojis that I use in. So when I create an assignment, I just right click and I can get to emojis and symbols. It gets a little like I work on a Mac mostly, like my own personal Mac is what I prefer. But I can also put in those emojis and symbols like on like our school computers. And so I just really keep those organized. And what they mean in my classroom is distance learning really changed the way my brain thinks about organization. It gets the previous ones are a little funky because it was finals week, but most of the time I have it organized by day of the week. So like Monday, I have my daily agenda slides, and then It's organized by like Monday is like this little notebook. Tuesdays is going to be the red notebook. Wednesdays, some days, like some assignments overlap a couple days. So I'll put that to show that we worked on this assignment for multiple days. But like Wednesday is always orange, Thursday is going to be blue, and then Friday, it's not showing up on here, but Friday is always green. So it's just like a little way like of looking to see what we're doing for the week. I used to organize it by topic, and distance learning really changed like how I just decided doing daily, because I realized that students really didn't know what topics we were working on when. Like they didn't really care if it was a writing assignment or a reading assignment unless it affected their grade, quite honestly. And so they had this was a little bit easier for students to organize. So that's what it is. That's just how I organize it. And then the digital notebook. So I'm going to go over this particular assignment as my session tomorrow is on StoryCourse. And this one, I can't remember which one. I usually use Slides Go or Slides Mania. I think this one is a Slides Mania template that I found. And I think, so let me go to it now and see. Those are the two sites that I use for projecting them. And I'm pretty sure this one is just a Slides Mania digital notebook, but they have a ton to use. So if you go to education, my phone, here, they should have digital notebooks and stuff here, but you can go to education, search digital notebooks, and you'll find a lot of templates there. So Slides Mania is completely free. Slides Go is somewhat free. I ended up splurging and buying the premium because it wasn't that much, just to have a little bit of, especially last year when I was creating a lot of advisory lessons. I wanted the freedom. But yeah, Slides Mania is like the place to go to for digital notebooks, and it has it all there. All right, so that is it for content. If you guys before we have a little bit of a break, but if you guys I'll put the eval and the sign in for the sandbox in the next chat, but I'm going to stick around if you guys want to ask any questions while I'm here. Oops, let me fix the sign in link. While I'm here, if you guys want to play around a little bit, there's a couple of things for the sandbox time that we can explore. So one of them is to create those Google Classroom rubrics. It does, take a minute to kind of set up those rubrics, especially if you're using Google Classroom or even in the Google Sheets. So take some assignments that you do often in your classroom, whether it's like I do assignment on Friday, which is a weekly reflection. Oh no. Let me see. For the sign-in link. Let me see if I can fix those links. It's showing up for me. Make sure that you're using your school account, because it may not work if you're not using your school account. And the sandbox will be in the same meeting. So I'm just gonna stick around. So if you guys want to like start exploring now, you can, or if you need to take a break. But the rest of this time is just playtime. So technically from 11 to 12, but I'm just gonna stick around here if you guys have any questions or want to ask them right away. But I'm gonna be right here. So sandbox time will be the same. Just make sure you sign in so you can pay for that extra hour. And I'll see what is going on with the link if anybody else can't look at it. But so for sandbox time, two things that I recommend for my session is one, to create those Google Classroom rubrics, use Allison Keeler's templates. They can just kind of get familiar with using those templates and sheets if that's an option you want to do. Or I highly recommend during this time, the classes start on Monday. So using that time to really organize and explore your Google Classroom. I know I need to go through and just kind of get it prepped for Monday. So this is a really good time if you want to kind of prep your classes for Monday as well. So there's two former presentations that I've done, and that's Google Classroom organization. So how to use those emojis, just different ways of setting up your classroom. And then also those exit tickets and online discussions. I really like the questions features in Google Classroom. So we have that as well. So if you guys, that's our sandbox time, but I'm going to stick around. If you guys want to take a break, grab coffee, go stretch, use the restroom, or if you just want to stick around with me too, but I'll be here for the next hour to answer questions and have you guys explore Google Classroom a little bit more. I'm also going to stop recording.